I've enjoyed the series of the new Planet of the Apes films, especially the first one, which remains the absolute best of the batch. But the other two films were okay in their own way, and had their own narratives. And the first, second, and third one, in some instances, one's better than the other in that aspect, and others, it's kind of a mixed bag here and there on the approach to those. But overall, a fairly decent little trilogy there in the saga of Caesar, as it was established there. And so, what else to do? There was a nod in, I believe, yeah, the first film about this mission to Mars that disappeared. So I said, "Hey, was that Taylor?" And of course, I could get to that point, but I don't know. It's like, how would you handle it? What's the angle? It's an interesting thing of the take they would do. You couldn't do the surprise ending as the original did. And so the first film starts off with this very sad, heartbreaking story, and that's what it unfolds as. Whereas the science fiction aspects of the apes and everything happening is kind of off to the side. The terrible thing of the scientist's father and all that, he just wants to save him from Alzheimer's, and and yet it results in this worldwide disaster. And of course, once again, which is pretty typical of science fiction, of don't mess with forces you don't understand. And sure enough, that's what happened, and then it plays out. And in this instance, the previous Apes films from the 70s had interesting aspects to them and concepts and whatnot, but the ultimate explanation of how it happens, well, this one's much better and has some credibility to it. Granted, it's all fiction, but that type of messing with genetics and whatnot, and trying to use apes as an experiment to find some cure for it, and that you could restore intellect and whatnot to a damaged brain, and then the accidental happening here is what occurs. But in the original, it was basically time travel shenanigans is what resulted. An ape from the future came to the past, had a child, and the child integrates with the others, and then there's this weird plague of cats and dogs dying out, and they and so they adopt apes to be the new pets, and it was wild and crazy, and I enjoyed it for what it was. But this new set has a more up to date, if you will, explanation as to how this could have occurred. But the same thing is man destroyed his world, and in both versions that remains true, and that's what happened. Now, with the trailers and whatnot for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, I got the impression that it was much further into the future, but that is not the case. It is further. Caesar is no more. He has died. But he casts a long shadow. He's the founder of their society. And of course, it's also the exploration of, well, the current apes, some of them get Caesar right, some of them get him wrong, that type of thing. And the interpretations of your foundations, your prophets, your heroes, and that sort of thing is explored here. And how you could get it wrong or get it right, So I'm not going to spoil the plot and everything. I had heard that the main girl, as you see on the poster and that sort of thing, is this girl boss character. I just disagree with that. That's not really the case. And in fact, in some ways, you could see her almost being portrayed as a villain in the story. Although there's some understanding, somewhat, but that comes about. but as it goes. She is called Nova, but she is not a new version of the Nova from the classic film. There's an explanation for this, and Nova is not her real name and all that. And so it would be spoiling too much to explain her story overall, but ultimately, the adventure they have, and at the end, I think it's obviously a setup for this will be the beginning of the second trilogy of this story, of where they go forward. And there's some similarities here between this and Fallout, if that gives you a clue as to what unfolds. But again, it's like, this post-apocalyptic world as a result of what happened and what's to become of humanity. And you get to see them as they are, and also what became of everybody. So I think it's a setup for the factions at odds and that sort of thing. There already is between different tribes have formed among the apes, even though they weren't initially aware of one another at this point. But as it keeps going, you probably get to see more of that as it goes. But the main thing here is it's not that further along. It's a couple of generations later. So it's not as distant into the future like in the original movie when Taylor arrives, has no idea that he's just back on Earth. It's just in a distant future, and that sort of thing. So they haven't gone that far into it, and I don't know how far they're going to go with the story, depending on how popular the films are, of course. But as Caesar was the main character of the first three films, now it's this new character, Noah is his name, Noah. And I think if they make two more, it'll be his story for the most part. This is kind of his adventure that happens, a tragedy that he suffers at the outset of the film, and as it goes forward, where this other tribe is going and what their leader wants, and so on and so forth. And the mystery of the humans is explored here. And all of that is a bit of a discovery for Noah. And he comes to a fundamental truth for himself. But it's basically that encapsulated adventure for this. But clearly, it's a setup for a further film, especially with the ending. And where things will stand between him and the girl, and what her plans are going forward. So I don't expect it to jump too far into the future in another film where it's generations later or anything like that. I imagine some years will have gone by, but the parameters set by the events of this film would be followed forward in that narrative. So as far as getting to Taylor and the like, probably not. And again, I'm not sure how you would approach that and what would be the angle for it. You can come up with something, but you ultimately end up in the same narrative of the astronaut lands on Earth, doesn't know it's Earth, finds all these apes, struggles with that, and then, oh no, the Statue of Liberty, I was on Earth all along. Damn, you blew it up. You just can't do it again. Because you see it coming, so you can come up with some clever angle of a narrative about an astronaut showing up to a completely alien Earth to what he left behind, then you've got something there. Otherwise, is there enough compelling story here out of this? And for me, I'm interested in seeing another one out of this. Others, maybe not so much. The first film of the Caesar trilogy, I'll call it, is the absolute pinnacle and best, and it gets a bit watered down as you go. And so Kingdom is nowhere near as good as the first three. I enjoyed it. I liked it okay. It's not as good as those, and I'm not sure that it can be. So that in and of itself could be a reason, like, well, just for completist purposes, I'd like to see it continue, which I would imagine would take two more films. And then that's that. But if the audience is not going for it, then I guess it could end here. And it could. It could. You could just leave it open for where it goes. And there's only a certain amount of possibilities anyway for what becomes of the world when it's the planet of the apes. Yeah. So there you go. That's my take on it. I was avoiding spoilers as much as possible, but I'd recommend the film. I I I enjoyed it okay, uh, but yeah, it's not as good as the first three, but still good.